Hi there, Jazz here, your blind occupational therapist. Welcome to the Insight Channel, your user's guide for learning how to live your best life with vision loss. Cooking meat effectively can be a little tricky if you're used to depending on your vision, but that doesn't mean it can't be done if you have vision loss. There are actually lots of ways that you can tell if your beef, poultry, or pork are done, and so we are going to have a meat feast. This video is the first in a series to show you different ways to cook meat dishes. And today we're going to focus on browning ground meat. So let's get started. Before I get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Nick for being the first person to suggest this topic. So thanks, Nick. This one's for you. Okay, carnivores, let's talk. I know that everyone has their own special way that they like to prepare ground meat, and that's cool. But today I am going to just give you some ideas that could help you get started, maybe make your life a little easier. You just take it and make it your own. So I know that the oven, the Instapot, the slow cooker, those are all really great ways to cook dishes that use ground meat. But today I'm not going to talk about recipes. I'm only going to talk about methods to make sure that your meat is cooked for whatever dish you're doing. So I'm going to start with the quicker and less conventional method, the microwave. I know it seems a little unconventional to use a microwave to brown ground meat, but actually it's a quick and easy way to do it. And so, especially if you're going to be throwing it into another dish like mac and cheese, or you're making manwich or sloppy joes or something like that. So today I'm using ground turkey. But before you get started cooking it, you want to make sure that you smell it and touch it to get a feel for the texture of the meat and the smell of the meat, because that's going to be important for figuring out if it's cooked. So when you are cooking it in the microwave, you want to crumble the ground meat into a microwave-safe dish and make sure you have a nice, even, smooth layer before you put it in. Now, once you put it in the microwave, you're going to put it in for 1 minute on high, lightly covered. So I just have a paper towel here. So lightly covered, put it in for 1 minute, and then after that minute, take a fork, break it up, mix it up, put it in for another minute, and you keep doing that until the meat seems like it's cooked. It should take 3 to 5 minutes. After 3 minutes, be sure that you mix it up really good, because the sides are going to start cooking more than the inside. So you want to really get it all mixed up and broken up. And by now, you can start to feel that the texture is changing. It's no longer as gushy, but you can tell it's still not quite cooked. Now it's been 4 minutes and I can smell the meat is cooking. It's a very different smell from the raw meat, but let's see, it still feels a little gushy. I'm gonna touch it with my fingers. Yeah, it could go. I'm gonna try it for 1 more minute. Usually after about 5 minutes, the meat is good and brown. So I'm gonna go ahead, since this is a microwave safe dish, I can just pick it right up. I'm gonna go ahead and take it out, put it over here on the counter. Now for those of you who have low vision, you are going to want to get a bright light. I suggest a Larry light I have right here in my pocket. Something with an LED that's nice and bright to shine right on the meat so you can tell if it still has a little pink or not. Raw meat is going to be very pink. When you know it's cooked, when it's brown. So having some brighter light is your best shot at being able to use your remaining vision. For those of you who do not have usable vision, you're going to have to depend on your other senses to tell when the meat is cooked. So the first thing is texture. Does it feel firm. There is a very different texture to raw meat and cooked meat. Raw meat is very soft and squishy. Cooked meat is actually very firm. And as you practice this, you'll get to know that perfect consistency, that nice balance between raw and cooked. So this definitely feels firm. And then the next step is to use your nose. Smell it. Raw meat smells a little pungent. It's definitely a very different smell from cooked meat. This is actually perfect. So you always want to smell your meat before you cook it. That'll help you to know first if the meat is still good or if it's starting to turn. And then second, that'll give you something to go on when you're trying to smell a difference. So the third sense you want to use is your sense of taste. If you know the texture's right, it smells right, go ahead and taste it. Perfect. So now all I have to do is drain the grease, and this is going to be used for a wonderful spaghetti sauce. I bet you're wondering, how does she drain the hot grease? Well, the best way to demonstrate that is to show you how you can fry up your ground meat the good old-fashioned way on the stove top. So I'm going to do that right now. The key to frying it up in a pan is to have as much control as possible. And the best way to do that is through timing and through segmented portions. So when I fry up ground meat in a pan, I go ahead and break it up into smaller portions and make patties. When you're doing this, you want to make sure that all your patties are about the same thickness. So I'm going to actually take the patty now, since it's kind of evenly squished out, and place it into the pan. And I'm going to do that remembering where, judge it with my hands, remembering where I'm placing the patties, because that's going to be important when it comes time to go ahead and flip them over. So your patties don't have to be perfect because they're not going to stay patties forever. They are just for the purposes of gaining control. So now I've got 4 patties here. They're all relatively the same size. I am just pressing them down to make sure they're not thicker in the middle. And I have them in a pattern like a crisscross. So they're in a nice cold pan so I could use my hands. And now I'm going to turn on the fire to medium and go ahead and let them cook. And I've got a screen to put on top to keep the grease from splattering. So now that I've turned on the fire, they're starting to cook. I'm going to cook them for 5 minutes before using my double spatula to go ahead and flip them. Computer, set timer for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, starting now.
Computer, stop. Okay, it's been 5 minutes, and what I did was I turned off the fire just so the popping and snapping of the grease could calm down a little bit before I took the screen off so I didn't get popped. Now I'm using a double spatula because it allows me that control to go ahead and flip the patties. And since I placed the patties in here in a nice cool pan, I know exactly where they are, so I can get, oops. Well, that one might have broken up a little bit, but that's okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to let them cook for about 3 more minutes and then start breaking them up a little bit on medium. So again, I went ahead and turned off the grease. I turned off the fire just to let the grease settle so it's not, computer stop, so it's not snap, crackling, and popping quite so much. And I have, instead of the double spatula, I am using a slotted plastic spoon, which allows me to go in there and start breaking it up into smaller pieces. So we no longer have patties. So I'm going to where I know each of the patties are and go and just breaking it up. Okay. So everything can cook really well. Okay, I'm still going to let it cook for a few more minutes because it hasn't been cooked. It hasn't been cooking for 5 minutes just yet on this side. So now it's broken up and it's just about done. I've been stirring it up just to make sure that everything is good and stirred. I'm holding this screen between me and the meat just to keep it from popping on me. Okay, but I know from experience that with 1 pound of ground beef, it only takes about 10 minutes on the stove for it to be ready. So I am going to turn this off and then go ahead and drain the grease in the sink. So while this was cooking, I went ahead and put a paper towel down in my sink in case any grease spilled out. I want to be able to just wipe it up with the paper towel, and you really don't want anything wet in your sink. So make sure your sink is nice and dry because you don't want oil and water to mix. So I also have a bowl, and in the bowl is a colander, and I'm going to pour the grease into the colander and it'll bring it right into the bowl. Nice and safe and easy. One last thing, before I remove the pan and bring it over to the sink to drain the grease, one trick that I do to make sure that I can put this hot pan centered back on the burner is to take my cooking utensil and I hold it vertically next to the edge of the stove and lean it against the edge of the pan on one side, and then I go ahead and do it again in front of the pan on the front side. This helps me figure out, using my proprioception and sense of touch, to know what centered feels like, because we can't touch the stove itself to reposition the pan when we bring it back. Okay, so I moved the meat over to one side of the pan so it doesn't plop when I tilt it. I'm touching it to the colander that's sitting in the bowl in my sink, and I'm going to tilt the pan till the grease pours out. Here we go. Now I'm using my sense of hearing because I can hear the grease pouring. When that stops, I know that I've got most of it, and I can go ahead and flip the pan back up. Now, if there's any extra meat that would have fallen in the colander, I go ahead and just drop that into the pan and put it back on the stove. So I'm using my hand with the pot holder to make sure that I'm putting the pan on the stove. The fire is off. You can just use the pot holder to judge where you are at, or you can use your cooking utensil like I had shown you at the beginning to kind of lean it against the pan and line it up just to make sure you're in the right spot. All right, so now I can, this meat is ready for me to go ahead and make chili. This last method is a bit unconventional, but it's a perfect alternative if you don't want to have to deal with the hot grease. You can use an air fryer to brown ground meat, and the grease will drain beneath the basket, and you can set it aside and deal with it later after the grease has cooled. So I like to use my air fryer when I'm making taco meat for taco salads. So you can get the packet of seasoning at the store, and it's meant for doing on the stove. Usually you would put the seasoning in after you ground the meat, but in the air fryer, I have learned that if I mix the seasoning into the meat first, it's a lot easier. So I've already prepared the meat here. It's got the seasoning. I'm going to go ahead and I've warmed up the air fryer. So I'm going to go ahead and take the meat and crumble it into the fryer. It takes, my air fryer holds about 1 pound of ground meat and does it beautifully. So I'm going to go ahead and just crumble it in like so. I know it's got some big pieces, but I'll break it up as we go along. Okay, got my fork just to make sure I got everything where it belongs. Okay, good to go. So now we are ready to put it in for 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is 5 minutes in, add a little water, mix it up. The water is to keep it from getting too dry in the air fryer. Then we'll put in for another 5 minutes, mix it up and test it. And if it still needs to keep going, we'll just add a few more minutes. Okay, first 5 minutes. Ooh, it's cooking nicely. So I am going to go ahead, I'm going to pour a little bit of 1/4 a cup of water in there just to help keep it moist. And I'm gonna break it up a little bit with a fork. Mix it up to make sure everything's getting cooked evenly. And put it in for another 5 minutes. So now it's been, when this goes off, it's going to be about 10 minutes. And so for 1 pound of ground meat, it might be to your liking. Usually it is for mine, but I'm gonna go ahead and check. If you like it a little more well done, you can always stick it back in for another minute or two. But let's see what we've got. It smells done, and it definitely feels firm. Wonderful, actually. Let's see. Now that's going to be a little hot, but it definitely feels, oh, it's absolutely done. Smells perfect, and I think this is ready to go on a taco salad. So now you have insight into how this works. You can safely and effectively prepare ground meat and drain the grease with any degree of vision loss. All you have to do is put your senses to work. Your sense of touch, smell, and taste can be very helpful to you. And if you have low vision, be sure to have a nice bright light available so you can get a true sense of the color of the meat. There are always endless possibilities for adaptation. So if you have a special technique that works for you with vision loss, please share it in the comments so we can all benefit. One last shout out to Nick. Thanks for the great idea. And thanks for watching, everybody. Click the thumbs up if you like this video. Be sure to subscribe so you'll be notified for new videos. And of course, send me your questions, your comments, and any ideas for future videos. I'd love to hear from you. My job is to give you the tips, tools, and techniques for living your best life with vision loss. So no worries, you got this. See you next time.